Hello and welcome back to the second segment of Dateline New Haven on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Today, this segment, we have the pleasure of talking to a gentleman who made a lot of stories tick without always getting a lot of recognition for it for over 20 years in the Police Department of New Haven. He's just retired, starting a new chapter of his life. Good afternoon to former Lieutenant Stephan Torquati. Welcome on to Dateline New Haven for your first time.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Paul.
Good.
Great to see you.
I'm going to ask you to get real close to the mic. And it's great to see you too, Stephan. And I've always looked at your spelling, Stephan. Is it Stephen? Like, how do we pronounce it?
Stephen, but we can go with Stephan if you want to be real classy.
I was always worried, like whenever I type your name, I always wanted to make sure I was typing it right, you know. But
just the way it was spelled, just the way my mother picked, and we went with it. But it's been Stephen and Steve.
Well, Steve, you just retired from the New Haven Police Force after more than 20 years on the job. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Tell me about that. How's it feel to be retired? What brought about that decision?
It was a very difficult decision, but I think it was just time for me to move on, to try to look for another new chapter in my life. I accomplished a lot with the New Haven Police Department, and I'm very grateful to the city of New Haven and the people in New Haven, you know, who are also my neighbors, and you know, my colleagues. It was just time for me. You know, I got a slight nudge, and
why a nudge? They want to clear out people because they need people.
No,
right?
no, it wasn't anything I wanted to clear out. It was just a feeling I got, you know. And I think it was just time for me to move on to my next.
Because actually, this is a time when we're understaffed, the police department, and we especially. I mean, there's an opportunity when a lot of people with experience leave to have new people, new ideas. But the flip side of that is we've lost centuries of institutional knowledge and just experience day to day of how to do that job.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I will say that the nudge was personal for me. It was something that, you know, it would have been a career move for me that I was not. I didn't think it would have been beneficial to myself or the department, and so I thought it was just time to go. You know? So,
Steve, tell me, where did you grow up? I know you live in the East Shore now. Did you grow up in New Haven?
I grew up in New Jersey.
Where?
Town called Manchester Township, New Jersey, which was basically a military town. So Lakehurst Naval Air Station's there, and for any history buffs, that's where the Hindenburg crashed.
Really?
Yes, it is.
And were you in a military family?
My father served in the Navy, and my grandfather served in the Marines.
Wow.
And great-grandfather in the Marines. And,
wow.
So,
and did you go in the military?
I did. I served in the Marine Corps Reserve.
So you grew up with that tradition. Did you grow up feeling like that was public service is ingrained in your DNA?
I felt that, you know, serving the public was definitely something I was going to be geared towards, whether it was my father was a volunteer firefighter, and, you know, it's something that doesn't get the recognition it should. You know, at the time when we lived down in Manchester, New Jersey, it was a very small, growing community.
Is this Southern Jersey?
This is a little known place is Central New Jersey. There's North Jersey, Southern Jersey, and then there's a few of us who like to recognize Central Jersey.
And where's Springsteen and all that?
He's Asbury Park, so I would say he's Central Jersey, because that's Monmouth and Ocean County. I like to consider Central Jersey.
And did you grow up, Steve, given that background, knowing you wanted to be an officer, like in the military or the police, or what was your thinking?
I thought it was going to be police or fire.
And why?
Military. You know, I always looked up to my grandfather. I looked up to my father and what they did. My grandfather was, you know, he took advantage of the military. His time in the Marines allowed him to go to Boston University, and then also allowed him to go to Columbia University. New York University. And so it expanded things for him, and he ended up in the corporate world. So it gave him a jump start into his next career.
So what brought you up to New Haven and the police here? Had you gone to college first?
Quinnipiac University.
Oh, so that brought you to the area.
That brought me here.
What did you think of QU?
What's that?
What did you think of Quinnipiac?
I thought Quinnipiac was tremendous. I had a great time there. I didn't graduate on time. I ended up having to go back sometime afterwards, but I did get my degree from there.
All right.
But I made friends that I still have today that I was able to go see this past weekend.
Did you study criminal justice?
Political science with
cool.
a minor in history and a certificate in diversity studies. So
What was your instinct in politics?
it just sounded cool, I think, at the time.
I studied political science too. I like
when
it.
you're 19 years old, you're looking at what you're going to do there, and I wasn't interested in business. I wasn't interested in mass communications, which is Quinnipiac's big mass communications and business. They had political science, and I thought, you know what, this is interesting. Let me roll with this.
Steve, when I talk, a lot of police officers use politics as a dirty word. For them, it means people who posture and make speeches that tell people what they want to hear and make it hard for people like police officers or teachers who just have to do a job. Did you feel that too? Or Daniel Hunt says retired Lieutenant Carty is a great guy. Thanks for listening, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. Daniel's a good guy. I think it's with anything, there's politics in the office, there's politics in the radio, there's politics in wherever you go. And I think it's, it comes with the territory wherever you work, and you just expect it. You try your best to navigate through it.
But that's not, I guess, what political science is. Political science, you're looking at like what's a parliamentary system. That always really interested me, about how you choose who runs a place in Europe versus the United States, where it's representative democracy and all that.
How are the Europeans doing it? How are, South America, our African nations, Eastern Europe.
So how did you go from there to cop? Was that the plan all the time?
So I ended up, one of my friends at the university was like, hey, I'm going to take the police test in New Haven. Why don't you come along with me? And so I ended up taking the police test with him. And, if you had asked me, hey, you plan on staying in Connecticut when you would go to college, I would have been like, you're out of your mind. There's no way I'm staying here.
That was 2001, right?
This was, I want to say about, when did I take that? It would be 99.
Oh, okay. Because I thought you said 21 years this August.
Well, I got on, but, I had taken the test, and you have to go through the backgrounds. And
that was a pretty intense time when you started. That was 9/11 then when you started getting going.
Yes, it was.
What did that make you think about the profession you chose?
It made me feel good about it. You're talking about, 9/11, there were men and women who went into a building that was about to collapse, and that's a tremendous service towards their brother and sisters.
How people see law enforcement and public service. Like at 2001, that would be the height when they really respected the profession, the individuals. When we had the protests starting with the Minneapolis case, that George Floyd, that the profession takes a hit. And I always wonder about the people in the trenches kind of doing the job that's hard, that society, a lot of unsolved problems in society get left at the hand of the officer knocking on the door, going into the difficult situation. What was that like as someone who studied political science, to see how in the course of your career, the profession had all those ups and downs and how the public saw you in your job?
It wasn't difficult, and I'll say that because I don't have social media.
Good move.
So, I didn't see the constant barrage of, every side arguing with one another. I was able to do my best to, pay attention to the news, know what's going on within the country, know what's going on within the world, understand it, get a perspective of it, but not see the Facebook, Instagram,
That's a good move. That
TikTok perspective, which is, it's a 5-second dialogue for a problem that's much greater than a 5-second dialogue. So
Steve, we're talking to Lieutenant Steve Torquati, now recently retired Lieutenant Steve Torquati as of last week, from the New Haven Police Department, ready to start a new chapter of his life on Dateline New Haven. We're talking WNHH New Haven's home for community radio. So when you became an officer, you obviously had to start walking a beat, correct?
Yes, I did.
Where did you walk?
Kensington Street.
Oh, wow. You're right in the middle of it.
Dwight Chapel neighborhood.
I remember when you were the top cop in Kensington Street. That's kind of when I got to know you. But what was that like? That was at a period where things were pretty rough on Kensington Street.
It was, eye-opening. It was tough, but it was challenging. I mean, tough as in challenging. And, myself and my former partner, Dan Sacco, we embraced that. It was great to be on a walking beat in Kensington.
I never met an officer who said it was bad to be on a walking beat. Why does everyone say that? And we don't have the money, I guess, to have walking beats. People love the walking beats.
You know, I think it's very it takes a lot of money, takes a lot of personnel. You're taking away from other things. You know, you still need those radio cars to answer the calls for service, the motor vehicle accidents, the alarm calls.
Man,
and
the motor vehicle accidents, I was blown away when I found out how many there are. Mm-hmm. It's like every hour there are a couple, right?
Yeah.
Whew, that is.
But, you know, certain neighborhoods, you know, when I was a district manager, I made sure we kept that walking beat down. And, you know, we had one over at Chapel Norton, and we had one on Kensington Street. And the community loved them, and the officers enjoyed being on those walking beats.
I remember the fact you had a walking beat, if I'm not mistaken, was the way you were able to make one of those really hard arrests about the dirt bikes, that they were being kept in a garage. And if I'm not mistaken, I seem to remember your walking beat officers seeing where it was kept and getting the evidence that you were actually able to claim some vehicles and prosecute somebody who was tearing up the street and really endangering people.
Yeah, the dirt bikes are, you know, that's the best way to get them, though.
That's a tough one.
You know?
Yeah, it's a tough
You don't
case.
want officers chasing them. You don't want civilians knocking them off the bikes. You know, what's the best way to do it? By observing and then creating an investigation. Is it instant gratification for anybody? No, but they got a handful of dirt bikes off the street. Did it take a little bit longer than some people might have wanted? Absolutely. But was it safe? Was it effective? 100%.
I remember going in that backyard afterwards. They weren't seeing where they were all keeping them. Steve Torquati, do you remember anything from your early years walking a beat, a day you'll never forget or a night on the walking beat as an officer? And you said, oh, that's what this job is.
So there was an incident of Officer Sacco and I were walking the neighborhood, and we actually were over by it was Chaplain Day, and we were addressing some trespassing in the area, and all of a sudden we hear some tires screeching. We look up and we see a van. Next thing you know, gunfire. That van, you know, we end up calling that in right away. Now we're on foot, so we can't really do much, but we gave a description out what occurred. You know, they had individuals had fired some shots at some other people walking up Day Street from going towards Chapel from George and that general area there. They had shot a couple neighborhood kids.
Okay, you were a block over.
Yeah, we were a block over.
Yeah.
And they saw us where we were at, and they spun back around. Ended up going the wrong way.
So they're driving down Day one way back
towards
George.
They're going the wrong way down Day, and then end up a little bit on the wrong way on George. And I know other units picked it up, some other patrol units, and you know, I'll throw some names out that people probably haven't heard, but you know, I remember some of the individuals being involved was Bob Dudley and that's it, DK Runlet and Dave Capola. I want to say.
Dave Capola was always on. When he was on, he worked so many hours. I don't think he ever slept.
I'll tell you, when he was on, though, he was on. You know, and there was, there's very few people I would like to hear on the radio than Dave Capola, and he always knew where you were and to keep you safe. But back to the story, they end up catching the individuals in Westville, deep into Westville. I want to say Upper Whaley.
And what do you mean by catching? Did they were to stop the vehicle, or
the vehicle ended up? They ended up jumping out of the vehicle. There was foot pursuit, a couple handguns recovered, and you know, I had to have had like maybe 2 years on the job, you know, if that, and to see, you know, nobody got hurt. Luckily, everybody was professional. Everybody was cool. You know, I can recall one of the officers saying they were asking where they were, and they were using landmarks to, you know, and you know they were with the arrestee. They're like, I have the arrestee. Started picking out landmarks. He goes, the gun's right here. I can't move. You guys got to find me. And officers found him, and got everything squared away. It was eye-opening, to say the least.
Tell me what was eye-opening, because this is a very interesting story. Was this night, by the way?
This was at dusk.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a summer day.
Wow. So what was eye-opening about it?
Here I am, just relatively new officer, walking a beat. Everybody knew we walked that beat. You know, there was Also out in that area was Officers Mayo and Harkins, both walking the
Remember
beat.
that? Doug Harkins.
I remember
and Anthony
them,
Mayo.
responding, and the brazenness for somebody to do a drive-by shooting for all intent on.
But I guess what
on
I'm
one of our
interested in
streets.
is, and one reason I'm really glad you came up with this example. This is not the kind of thing that everybody hears about.
No.
But it's something that stayed in your mind out of thousands of incidents you've responded to. I can think of incidents where I've spoken to you where it's much bigger deal, quote unquote. But it's interesting to me that this one sticks in your mind. What about it sticks in your mind? So I have a theory, but I want to hear what you're telling.
I want to say that just the effort and the professionalism of the department really sticks out. Being a young officer and seeing everyone, a split second and automatically everyone, men and women who, were maybe sitting down having their lunch and instantly heard us, understood that this was clearly a dangerous situation and all responded effectively.
Because that's what I thought it was. That when what I've noticed about a lot of people you don't hear about who are police officers, they really enjoy the team effort and professionalism police officers. Like, of course, we talk about when things go wrong, but a lot of times things go right. And when things go right, I would bug you or other people, say, let's do Cop of the Week. Let's talk about this like officer who stood out. And you're always talking about how many different people had a part to play. So in this case, it started out because if you hadn't been walking the beat, if I'm not mistaken, there might not have ever been a quick description of that vehicle and what happened, so people understood the seriousness of the incident and what had to be done. And then you started naming me all these people, and they're all retired now, but all these people who then had something else they did. And at the end, there was a good outcome. So am I right in what appealed to you about that is that you were watching a kind of police work you respected that can make a difference for people that really wasn't showy?
100%.
But where a lot of people have to work together and do their jobs right for it to work.
No, it was something that I hope I instilled in the district when I became district manager, and it's
what was that?
Just that teamwork, that camaraderie, and being there for one another, being there for their community, and doing it in a professional, effective manner that not just their supervisors and the chief and the mayor can be proud of, but their community can be proud of. That the men and women who live in the Dwight Chapel community could be proud of their officers.
So when you think about that now, that's why I'm so happy you came up with that example. How do you think that in the context of the way we talk about police work now? Is that the norm? Usually, is that what happens?
I believe that's what happens. And I say that because of being on that, being a shift commander for some time and hearing incidents that would come into the city that were not publicized and were not, the folks just didn't know about it. And seeing things happen that, really, the officers just really did a fine job and their sergeants did a fine job.
And when somebody says a fine job, that's often in a way that doesn't sound like a story you'd put in a movie.
No.
Like, that really wasn't a movie, what you just told me. That was... So fair to say tens of thousands of incidents you've been in touch, played a part in?
Oh, yes.
And most are like that?
Most aren't like that. Some are, there's another incident. I was walking a beat, and I remember walking in that same general area. It was we were walking on Day Street, approaching George Street, and I just happened to look up for whatever reason. I don't know what it was. You could say the divine touch of the shoulder or something. And I look up, and I see what has to be a 2-year-old child on the second floor, like the overhang there, walking up there, and suddenly the child loses slip and ends up falling. And there was a wrought iron fence, and by the grace of whatever divine spirit you want to think of, that child missed that wrought iron fence. And my partner and I ran straight to that child, called for emergency services immediately. Child, kids are resilient, right? This kid took a header off a second floor overhang and came away with just, a whole bunch of tears, but nothing broken. But that incident has stuck with me for 21 years.
Why?
The fact that child, I don't know who to thank, but I thank whoever or whatever for that child not being impaled on that wrought iron fence. That, again, by the grace of something more powerful than any of us.
I'm trying to think with you as police officers. Does that mean that when you're an officer, you see stuff that you got to process?
You got to process quickly, and you got to address
it. Stays with you.
What's your instinct? What's most people's instinct when they see a child fall like that? It's obviously shock, but what's your instinct? Your instinct is get that child the appropriate comfort and help as soon as possible. And here I am, a 26, 27-year-old, officer. I would have, that stuck with me.
And now you're a father.
Now I'm a father.
And you're taking care of little kids.
Yeah. Elbows deep in diapers.
Let's go remind people you're listening to WNHH FM, 103.5 FM, live streamed from our studios on Elm Street in New Haven, and also at www.newhavenindependent.org. We've got a few minutes left with Steve Torquati before we go to our next segment with John Vallecca. Steve, tell me about quickly what positions you worked your way up. You were on a pretty much of a promotion track when you were in the department.
I did all right.
What roles did you have?
Patrol officer, walking beat. Did some time in family services as a patrol officer, narcotics investigation as a patrol officer, and then there was a unit called IDNet.
I remember IDNet.
That was around for a little bit. I was involved in that unit. We had a detective test coming, and I believe it was Captain Riker thought I had my wherewithal, and he said, you know what, you're probably going to do okay on the test. Let me bring you up as a silver badge into the Detective Bureau for major crimes. And I did well enough on the test to stay in that spot for a bit. Worked major crimes, worked with Bertram Etienne, and Manuel Evenzel, and Chris Perrone were pretty much my partners in my time there. Then I went over to the Tactical Narcotics Unit when... I
remember that.
Former chief there, Vallecca, sent me over there. Worked with Jeff Hoffman, was our commanding officer there. Great man. I had a great group of people with me. Derek Gartner, Roy Davis, Manuel Evenzel.
You became a district manager. Right where you started out, you became district manager.
Went over to district manager.
And then in your last gig was shift commander.
So I was shift commander, then I went over to deputy patrol commander.
Okay, and that meant you were the person usually overnight, right, or afternoon, who was in charge of all the cars going out responding to calls?
I was shift commander, yes.
And what was deputy patrol commander?
Deputy patrol commander was the second in command, doing a lot of the logistics, putting all the, making sure we had the numbers to be where they have to be, operational command for all our major events, protests, concerts, parades, road races.
So of all those jobs, what was your favorite one?
Shift commander.
Why?
I had a young group of sergeants and I had an even younger group of officers, and they bought into what I was trying to teach them, how I was trying to, keep them professional, keep them engaged, and they all bought in, and it trickled down between the sergeants and the officers, and, best time of my career was shift commander.
Before I let you go, you want to tell me one night you'll never forget as shift commander?
Captain Duff shooting.
Oh, you were the commander that night?
I was shift commander for that. Not only was it Captain Duff shooting, but it was a homicide scene.
Right.
That was one of the most difficult scenes, and you could
that was
throw
on
that
Henry
out.
and Ashman Street, where an off-duty top officer, beloved Anthony Duff, was driving home, and some guy was getting shot. He came out to try to help, and he got shot, and he almost died. Mm-hmm. What was tough about? Tell me about what that was like.
So you're, obviously, it's a murder scene. And it's an officer-involved shooting scene. And we have a person who not just committed a murder, he also shot at a police officer on the loose in our community. And we have agencies that are coming in from all over, from our surrounding areas, to assist. And I have a bunch of young officers who are scared and need guidance. And not scared in the sense of, fright, but scared in the sense of they just saw one of their most beloved supervisors get shot. They heard him over the radio, but we still have a job to do, and I have to keep them in focus, keep their sergeants in focus.
How did you do that?
Maintaining my composure and being calm and taking command of the radio and keeping everybody else off it.
How does that work?
For lack of a better way, I told everybody to be quiet and just started communicating with a small group of people who in turn communicated with their smaller group of people, delegating off to people to handle different operations. Lieutenant Jason Rankowitz took care of clearing houses with our SWAT engagement. Lieutenant Marshall on the perimeter, Lieutenant Davis on the perimeter. They were sergeants at the time, but, using them, and Lieutenant McDermott, helping secure the house. And using them, and they used their small group of officers, and they communicated with them. And they knew what I wanted by dictating over the radio, and they didn't have to get on the radio. They knew to just kind of speak face-to-face with their officers and get it done. It was, in the end, there was an arrest was made. I can't say it worked out. I mean, someone lost their life, and Captain Duff, suffered the consequences of getting shot. But, it worked out to where we could get justice for the shooting victim, the murder victim, Captain Duff. Detective Nivikoff did a great job on the investigation, and we got through it.
All right, you got through 21 years. Was it worth it?
Absolutely.
Would you advise people to do a career in policing?
I strongly advise it.
Why? I'm the recruit. Tell me why.
You know what? I got to meet and work with some of the finest men and women I've ever known, and will continue to know. And it's rewarding, and 21 years, I loved every second of it.
That's great. What's next?
I got accepted to Auburn University for their MBA program, their executive MBA program. So,
like your grandpa, maybe that's the next step.
I think I'm going to, maybe I'll try business for a little bit.
I'm sure you're going to do great at it because you did great as a New Haven cop.
Oh, thank you very much.
It was always a pleasure dealing with you. I always felt good about our police department when I dealt with Lieutenant Steve Torquati.
That's much appreciated, Paul. Thanks for having me on, and it was great seeing you again.
But we're not done yet, folks. Standing after we take one more break, and Harry Droz, our station manager, doing the transition, we're going to come back to talk about a less happy chapter in the New Haven policing, which is the recent case involving Mr. Richard Randy Cox, which has become a national story with implications for policy and how we police in New Haven. So hold tight, folks. Check out the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It'd Feel to Be Free from their CD, A Plea for Peace. And come back with us on the rebound with WNHH policing expert, John Valeka.